It's 10 o'clock. Clerk of the board, it looks as though we have a quorum. So if you want to begin recording now, I think we're ready to go. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022. This is the Clatsop County Board of Commissioners meeting, a work session, a virtual meeting. Work sessions are an opportunity for board members to discuss issues informally with staff and invited guests. The board encourages members of the public to attend work sessions and listen to the discussion, but there is generally no opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meetings, second and fourth Wednesdays of the month. This morning, we have 4 topics on our agenda, and we'll begin with the county manager update, please.
Thank you, Chair Thompson, members of the board. I'll be fairly quick. I just wanted to share the news that the Fair Board did approve the MOU that we've been working on, the revised MOU between the Fair Board and the Board of Commissioners. And so that'll be coming to your board on November 9th for your approval. So success on that front. Thank you.
Well, short and sweet. We like that. Okay. The housing dashboard. How about that one on page 3 of our agenda?
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to go ahead and then I'll hand it over to Amanda and Zachary. But so this project really came out of many discussions that have been taking place about housing. And so one of the notions is you don't know where you need to go unless you know where you are, and where you are is going to change over time. And so what we really wanted to do is to provide a resource to the decision makers, to the public, regarding what is available, what's in the pipeline regarding development, meaning all kinds of housing, and then what of those housing are really affordable. And so one of the things that the housing study said is that we needed all types and forms of housing. And so we're trying to really capture both those all types and forms of housing and the affordable housing through the dashboard. So what we hope is this tool will be updated, maintained, and will become a resource for everybody. So I'll hand it over to Amanda.
And board chair and other commissioners, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Good.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Let me see if I can. Yes. Awesome. So for the record, I'm Amanda Rappenchuk, Management Policy Analyst, and also who's going to be presenting with me today, but unfortunately he isn't available due to a prior arrangement. But that's Zachary Hunt, and he's a GIS technician, and he's the one that built the tools that I'll kind of go over within the dashboard. So he was a big part of this. And so, like Don was talking about, this is a new online resource outlining the local affordable housing and current housing development. This was made available at the end of July with the intent for the dashboard to continue to evolve to more effectively communicate this important information. So you'll see this first section just kind of highlights the county's engagement and activities related to housing, and then also provides some information for those in need of local housing assistance or other social services. And then the second section here is in regards to affordable housing. So this includes the affordable housing web app that shows all known affordable housing within the county, which I'll show you in a moment. And then includes a few accordion tabs below, and these are just to help provide some definitions. So this first one, when we're saying, what do we mean when we say affordable housing? So these are the categories that HUD uses for their annual continuum of care, homeless assistance programs, housing inventory, county reports. A mouthful. And it's also used for the nationwide information system that's called Homeless Management Information Systems. And so these categories is what we utilize in the web app, and that's emergency shelter, safe haven, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, and other permanent housing. And please let me know if I'm talking about stuff and the screen isn't rolling, because I've had that before where I keep on talking and it's not going to the next slide. So please just let me know.
Could I ask, please?
Mhm.
I'm chair of the community action team, and Kat runs affordable housing in Cannon Beach, Elk Creek Terrace, and I don't see that there. And suddenly I just realized that I had assumed it would be there. Is that an oversight perhaps?
Are you talking about in this first section in terms of outlining the different
affordable-
engagement?
Yeah. When we look at that, community action team has spun off CCA, and that's mentioned, but community action team itself is not. That, and I apologize because I've looked at this several times, and suddenly seeing it on screen reminds me of that fact. So maybe offline we can talk about that a little.
Yeah, and I mean, that really gets to the point of this continuing to evolve to more effectively communicate that information. And so that feedback and continuing to, whether we're getting emails from the public for the cities that we're partnering with in this to provide this information has been really helpful, because the more effectively we can communicate this, the better of a tool it can be. And then this next tab, how HUD defines housing. So this is looking at the area median income percentages, and these are their categories when it's talking about low income housing, very low income, extremely low income. And this isn't necessarily what we highlight within the web app that I'll be showing you, but this is just some information to kind of explain what we're talking about if we're talking about AMI percentage. And then this last part, how does Clatsop County define workforce housing? So this is a question that comes up a lot in terms of how do we look at the difference between affordable housing, workforce housing, and then market rate. So we just kind of wanted to provide that information. And we used the definition that Urban Land Institute uses for workforce housing, workforce households, to create the AMI percentage range below, which shows affordable housing, workforce, and then market rate, and kind of how we differentiate between those. And that's more highlighted in the next web app I'll show with the housing development. But it's just a question that gets asked a lot, so we went ahead and included it in that section. So let me go ahead and I'll take you to the affordable housing web app. Did it change screens? Are we all seeing this new splash screen? Awesome. So both web apps start with a splash screen that's just kind of explaining a little bit what the web app is and kind of the different the layer list and the legend and the different icons. And so on the left-hand side here, we have those categories that we mentioned earlier with the emergency shelter, transitional housing, and then we also have the data point for county surplus lots. And so you can zoom in here and see these different, let's see. And I apologize because Zachary is really great at this language, and I'm very green at it. And so he's probably going to be watching the recording of this and cringing that I'm just like, oh, these are data points. So this would be a county surplus lot. You can go ahead and click on that, and that provides the information that's also included in the expression of interest page in that chart that it provides. And then also we have these other data points that you can click on, and it'll have some information as well. We don't have, there's been a lot of questions about including, the contact information, whether this particular affordable housing allows for pets, or if there's age limitations or accessibility and different things like that. Unfortunately, that information is always changing, and it's really hard for us to have those point of contacts for each of those properties. And so to provide the most accurate information, what we've done is provided different web links. And so right here, you'll notice where it says website, if applicable, and it'll have a point that says more information, and you can click on that and it'll take you to the website for the nonprofit that manages that, or I think a couple of them take you right to NOHA, the Northwest Oregon Housing Authority, if that's one of their properties. And then we also have here, flip it. Similar to the other county web apps, you can click up here for the layer list. And so we've cleaned this up a little bit so it doesn't have as much information, so it's not as overwhelming. But you can click in and see different things like this one has food, healthcare, schools, and transit. And you might notice that it's not highlighted, and so you just have to kind of zoom in, and if it's visible, it'll darken over on the side. But yeah, so you can just kind of see these different boundaries and look at it with these different layers. Does anyone have any questions about this specific web app?
I actually do. Considering that sometimes low income people, I don't know if they would want to access this information. Have you done any particular outreach to libraries, the source of accessible computers and a way to get at this information for someone who doesn't have their own computer?
We have not, but I can tell you, so in my role, I also manage our contract with CCA for Veteran Services Program, and that's Clatsop Community Action. And I was talking with the Veteran Services Officer, Josh, who spoke at the most recent, he did the proclamation for Operation Greenlight. And he was talking about how oftentimes he'll be sitting down with veterans who are in need of housing. And this is a helpful tool where he'll pull it up and he'll be like, okay, what area are you looking for housing? And so then they can kind of identify that there and then get to the link and kind of provide or get more information once they're figuring out, okay, what agency runs this or where can we look for it? Oh, sorry, my phone. So I've had stories like that where different agencies are using it, but we haven't done particular outreach. But if that's something that the board is wanting, we can look into that.
You have a full plate, but I'm just thinking the more people know. I see that Commissioner Bangs has a question. Commissioner Bangs, I think you're muted.
Oh goodness, yes. So I was just curious along the same train of thought. Have we had outreach to our local nonprofits like Helping Hands and Filling Empty Bellies, the Harbor, etc.?
I don't know if County Commissioner Don might be able to speak to this a little bit. But we haven't done specific outreach to these organizations. We've partnered a lot with the cities to communicate with that. And so it's come up, I know, in conversation. I don't know if specific outreach that has been done, but maybe Don can speak a little bit more to that.
Chair Thompson, members of the board, what I would say is that we have made general awareness of this tool through the cities, and we've mentioned it to our nonprofit partners. But really, that's going to be an ongoing iterative, process as we move this forward. We've been really focusing on the back end of this, which is working with the cities so that they are updating as they get new building permits and new development proposals. And so that's really what the focus has been, is the back end, to make sure that we have a robust tool that has some predictability to it. So as this takes flight, though, certainly we will work with our nonprofit partners and with others to make sure that there's visibility.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Follow up?
Yeah, just a quick follow up. I'm actually really excited about this, just because if this framework works for this particular topic, then we can duplicate it for others. And it also really solidly falls under our strategic plan of communication and our efforts to be more transparent and communicate with all of our stakeholders. And this is really well done. This is very user friendly, and it's wow, I'm impressed. So I'm kind of excited to see what response or how it works. I'm excited to see it in action.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Well said. I don't suppose we'll be asking for metrics, but they might become available at some point. This is just invaluable for accessibility of information. So really well done to staff. Did you want to carry on?
Yeah, thank you. And I just, again, I want to highlight Zachary is the one that put all of these web apps together, and he did a really great job with this. And there were a few times, you know, where they had some servers down, and he carried right on through. So he did a lot of great work. So we have this next section that's talking about housing development. And this will be the housing development web app that I'll show. So this is all known housing development projects. We're talking about market rate, workforce, and affordable within the county limits. And so this work has more been focused on partnering with the cities to get that information in addition to county staff. So you'll see here, there's a link where it says submit new housing development projects. And so in partnering with staff and getting their feedback, we've created, or Zach has created a survey for them to input that new information. And so I'm just going to pull that up just to kind of give you a look on that end. And so this is available if someone from the public clicks on that, they might see that. And so we've included these links at the top in case they're looking for information that's not necessarily specific to this survey. But so then staff go through and fill out this information, which populates on the back end for Zach, who verifies it, and then we'll be adding it to the web app that I'll show you. So it's basic stuff like their contact information, their jurisdiction, their permit numbers. And again, it may vary for each jurisdiction, but that helps us kind of an identifying piece. The type of housing development, if the development includes single family dwellings, housing classification, and that's a little bit like, that's what we talked about earlier in terms of the affordable, workforce, and market rate. And to be honest, some of the feedback that we've gotten is a lot of times it's not clear. And so maybe a default for staff might be to mark it as market rate. And then as they find out later, they let us know and we can update that on the back end. And so then it's reflected in the web app. Project status, which staff have helped us figure out what definitions kind of work best with the different jurisdictions processes. And so we have project planning, and then building plans, and our permit approved, and then certificate of occupancy. Public hearing date, if that's applicable, any other comments, and then there's the opportunity for them to upload an image, which gets included with the profile, and then they're just kind of identifying that location. And then let me go ahead and I will pull up the web app. Can everybody see the new splash screen? Awesome. Okay, and so this looks very similar to the last one. You'll see the categories are different in the key. We have the project planning, building plans, permit approved, and then certificate of occupancy, and it's color coded here. And just like the other one, you can zoom in and see these different data points. Let's see. And as you zoom in, more things will pop up. And so this one also includes the affordable housing data as well. So if anybody's wanting to cross-reference that, it's already included in this web app. So if you click on a data point, it'll show the information that's collected in the survey. And so this one doesn't have any pictures, but if there were, you could click on that and then that would pop up. And then we have just similar to the last one in terms of different categories. There's more categories here because a lot of times the audience who's going to be looking at this is potentially developers or anybody in the housing world that might want to know a little bit more of that information. Does anybody have any questions about this web app?
Well, could you show someplace besides Astoria? How about Seaside or Cannon Beach, just to give us a little bit of geographical scope, because it's wonderful information. It's a simple phrase, oh, a housing dashboard, but the quantity and the quality of the information is wonderful. And the fact that Zach isn't here and you're doing this means that it demonstrates user-friendly attributes. Yes.
And yeah, thank you so much. One thing I do want to note here, So we'll be including in the layer list within each fiscal year what housing projects were created. And so as something moves into certificate of occupancy, if it's affordable housing, then that'll be added to the affordable housing web app. Or if it's market rate or workforce, it'll be noted on a layer that says, you know, how many projects or the projects that were created in, let's say 2022. And so you'll be able to click on that layer and then those will pop up. And so over time, we'll be able to track those data points of how many housing units were created. And again, this is all in partnership with the cities. And so as they're getting information, we're kind of working to put this all together. And so they've been really good at, as things are shifting or changes with any of the projects, with reaching out, but also the process that we're creating, and this is fairly new, is on about a quarterly basis. We're reaching out to them, providing them the data points for their jurisdiction, and then they let us know if there's any edits, and then we make those on the back end. So at least on a quarterly basis, that's happening. Those updates are happening, but generally we've been able to do that in a much faster time frame.
Commissioner Bangs.
I was just curious regarding development and kind of keeping track and counting how many new living spaces are developed over from now, you know, continuing through the years. We had, I can't remember the study, but it identified the gap number of houses that we needed to develop in order to meet the need. And I was just wondering if there's some sort of dashboard that can show where we're at, but where we need to go.
So that data point isn't included on our main dashboard page, but it's something that we're looking at. I think we've been careful about how we want to include that data on this dashboard as we're partnering with the cities to make sure it's showing as a joint effort, and that data point, as it may change as the housing needs change. And so if someone for the public is looking at that information and is, you know, oh, how come we're not here yet? Or how come we don't have these numbers yet? It doesn't necessarily provide all that background and context. So we've been a little bit hesitant with putting those numbers up before we can kind of figure out a way to present that to provide more context and more information.
I agree. It would be up for translation of the viewer, and sometimes we don't without all of the information. Yeah, no, thank you for being so thoughtful.
I see Commissioner Webb, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to say that that because of the changes, Astoria is the only city in the county that is required now to change its zoning code, but that is going to change the numbers from the housing study that was done in 2019 significantly in terms of need and capacity within the zoning envelope. So I think it probably would be a good idea to kind of wait a little while to adjust those numbers, because the 2019 housing study is going to be a little bit out of date pretty quickly. But I like the idea of being able to project need versus existence versus up and coming. So thank you, Commissioner Bangs, for that idea, because I think it's I think that's a really good one. It's not only, you know, how are we doing and what's coming online, but where do we actually need to be? So thank you. I think it's a really good idea.
Thank you, Commissioner Webb. So Amanda, your reward for doing such a good job is we want more, please.
Thank you. No problem. Were there any last questions about the web app before I just move on to the last little part of the dashboard?
Commissioner Tayoka, do you have any comments to make?
Well, the only thing I'd say is that, you know, from the regional task force that we're involved with county manager and myself, I use the web map, the dashboard as a data point to help us. But, especially in the workforce housing, it's going to take land use and zoning changes. It's going to take, different mechanisms to help us make room or, help us increase the supply of area and housing that is available. So this is a great tool to see what's available, and it kind of sparks what we need to do to adjust, maybe urban growth boundary, land use, zoning to help us achieve the goal of more housing. So the dashboard is valuable of telling us what we have right now, but not only that, it explains what we need to do to change to expand our inventory. But thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. It's an empowering tool. And when I look at it and I consider how it will be used, I think of the interaction between where am I looking for housing and where are services I need. That brings to mind childcare, Head Start. So I think to the extent that staff is willing to partner with other agencies who may have information that's useful to the user. On the other hand, there are limits to our staff's capacity. So we would understand, I think, that if you've reached your capacity and can do no more, our appetite for more will have to be contained. But really well done, very well done. Thank you.
And that's a good point. Also, I just want to highlight, I've mentioned the partnership with the city and county staff for providing these data points. I mean, we can only imagine the amount of work that they have to do in terms of the amount of staff and then the projects that they're working on. And so them taking the time to provide us this information and update us when that information changes has been huge. And we're really thankful for that, because we know that takes them away from the stuff that they need to get done on a daily basis. And so we're really appreciative of that. And then this last section, we just have housing studies and reports. The top portion of it is the studies and reports funded by the county or the cities. And so this just kind of provides a list of them when they were completed and who they were created by. And then the bottom portion is funded by third parties. I know there's been a few questions that have come up from the public in regards to the 10-year plan to end homelessness. And so that was kind of like why we wanted to highlight that, because that report wasn't necessarily run by the county. And so then there were questions about, what was being kind of like we've talked about with the data, what are these performance measures? What are these marks, and are we meeting them? And so just to kind of create a clear outline of where the information was coming in from and how we can use that best.
Thank you. When I read that 10-year plan to end homelessness, it seemed clear to me that report saw that the problem was homeless people, and we've shifted. We're no longer blaming homeless people for the problem. We have a different point of view, and this tool goes a long way toward addressing it. Anything else? All right, I seeing no comments from commissioners or from County Manager Boone. Are we ready to move on to item 3, the fiscal year 2023 first quarter financials?
Good morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Oops. Amanda, do you mind? Thank you.
Sorry, I was trying to find that button. I think I found it. Thank you. Thank you very much, commissioners.
Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Great. We will make this super short, quick, and sweet. This is for the quarter 1 financials for the 22-23 fiscal year. Oops. Let's see. So just some general fund financial highlights. The resources were in line with the 22-23 budget and past history trends. Of the revenues, we've received 14% of those budgeted. Though we're at 20 at the time of this report, we're at 25% through the year. We expect that lower 14% because we don't begin receiving our property taxes until this current month. So we'll see that jump up on the next quarter financial report. Expenditures were 19% of total budgeted budgeted expenditures. And again, that's consistent with prior years in hopes that the county is below that 25% mark at this time. So for the general fund resources, the total revenues received as of September 30th was 3.5 million of the $25 million budget. Please note that of that 25 million, 10.5 is property taxes. So again, we won't start receiving those until this month. So that amount will jump up substantially after that comes in. And another interesting note is interest rates have began to go back up to pre-pandemic levels. The local government investment pool, the rates are currently 2.6% versus the low of 0.45% during the same time last year. So we've seen a pretty large increase in our interest receivables that we've gotten from our investments from the prior year. General fund expenditures, the total budgeted expenditures for the general fund is 32.9 million, and that includes the contingency. 18% of these expenditures have been expended as of September 30th, and that is consistent with prior year trends and what we would expect. And then for all other funds, excluding the general fund, revenues as of September 30th was 6.3 million or 19% of the budgeted revenues. This is slightly higher than the 21-22 fiscal year, and that is mainly due to those interest rates receiving those higher rates. Expenditures as of September 30th for all other funds was 10.8 million or 14% of the budgeted expenditures. And that is substantially below the 25% due to those contingencies that are included in many of those other funds. If we were to pull out that contingency amount in those funds, we would be at 21% of the budgeted expenditures. So right in line with where we want to be at 25% of the year. That is all I have. Do you have any questions?
I do have a comment. I can tell that the report you're giving us reflects a lot of work that we asked you to do to make the budget more clear about the impact of contingencies on reporting. So I'm grateful for that. It gives a truer picture to give both of those data points. I have no other questions. Does any commissioner have any question or comment? All right then.
Thank you. Oh.
Commissioner Bangs, there you go.
I just have a comment of, I am going to miss you.
Oh, thank you. I will miss all of you too. It's been a pleasure working for you all.
You've done an amazing job. So, it's going to be missed.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay, so I hate saying goodbye, but good job and well done and best wishes. Your work here has been substantial. You've built on the fine work of your predecessors. You've made a significant contribution, and the door is always open, I think, to your return.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Take
You're
care,
welcome.
everyone.
Thank you. All right, then, we're on item 4, the draft law deck amendments, rural ADUs and legislative updates. Oh, boy.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Julia Decker, Planning Manager, Community Development, and I am sitting in this morning for Gail Henriksen, who is out of the office today. And I am going to share my screen here in just a moment. There we go. And I'm hoping that you're all seeing that.
Yes.
Okay, I see a couple of nods. Okay, excellent. So this has been the legislative updates, and also a kind of a subset of that is the potential for accessory dwelling units in rural lands areas. And this is kind of a hand-in-glove thing. And Gail is much more conversant and would present much better on it. I hope to be adequate. So let me just kind of remind you all where we've been. We started in January of this year with staff presenting information to the Planning Commission regarding House Bill 3012 and Senate Bill 391, both of which would allow permitting of accessory dwelling units on lands designated for rural residential development. And in May, staff made that presentation and the Planning Commission's comments to your board. And during that work session, your board provided some input on the Planning Commission's considerations. And so your concerns were regarding excessive oversight and permitting requirements, that there not be public hearings for ADUs on rural lands, or for parking and accessory structures for ADUs. In other words, streamline all that. You did not want eligibility to be contingent on proximity to shopping or services. That was not a consideration. There was an idea that neighbors should have maximum control over their own lands. Also, there was concern about staffing capacity if the procedures were too complex. And there was not unanimous agreement regarding whether accessory dwelling units should be allowed in hazard zones, and or whether owners should be required to notify potential renters that an ADU is within a hazard zone. So that was sort of left up in the air a little bit. We spent much of the spring and early summer with a questionnaire that was out there for the public. It was available on the county's website in a couple of places. And it had 196 responses, and we'll take a look at those in a moment. Gail did find the distribution of respondents by commissioner zones as follows. And as we can see, Commissioner Banks District 4 represents a third of the responses, 34%. So that in itself is interesting, because that's East County. So we will just kind of fast forward a little bit here. We'll also be talking about the legislative updates that include more than accessory dwelling units, but we're going to focus first, I think, on accessory dwelling units. So the next steps on all of these, just so that we know as going forward, we're presenting this information to your board now to obtain any additional feedback that you might have prior to scheduling these items for public hearings before the Planning Commission. And we are looking for any recommendations that you might have for whatever it is that you want incorporated in there, that we would then take to the Planning Commission and get those scheduled probably for early 2023, and then their recommendations would come back to your board. So I'm going to get through here real quickly. And we had this then was the ADU memo from David and Gail to your board regarding the accessory dwelling units, some of the information. But here are the responses, which are really interesting to these questionnaires that we had on the county and department homepages, about the things that people were concerned about when these are the respondents. And most people were concerned about complex permitting. And that was a major concern, followed by increasing the supply of long-term rental units. That was something that people also expressed interest and concern in. And then the third most important feature to people was maintaining the community character. So those were the top three things of the responses. One of the questions, if you do not already have an approved ADU, on a scale of 1 to 5, how interested are you in building an ADU? 1 is the least interested and 5 is the most. And as we can see, number 5, most interested, that's almost half the respondents. So there's definitely some interest in it. But then we get into this next question, which is, if you are a landowner, what size is your parcel? 41% of respondents had less than an acre, and another 21% had between 1 and 2 acres. So 62% of respondents actually would not meet the 2-acre minimum that is required under the House Bill 391. Because that does require, and it's not negotiable, that there be a 2-acre minimum lot size for accessory dwelling units. So I think one of the things, oops, I'm sorry.
Well, here's the pinch point. When I was looking at this packet, I thought, okay, here's the statute, 2 acres. The folks who want to build them don't qualify. Is there anything that we can do as a county to resolve that difference?
The 2-acre minimum lot size under these statutes is not negotiable. It's 2 acre minimum. And this has probably got a couple of reasons behind it. One, in 1999 or 2000, I can't remember when, the rural lands designation, which is where the ADUs would be permitted, went to a 2 acre minimum lot size. Period. That's now, and that's more than 20 years ago. That designation changed, and that was at the state level. And the county enacted 3661. I can't remember the number of our ordinance, but we updated our ordinance in 2001, I believe. So we have a 2 acre minimum lot size in all the rural lands areas now. Except for the coastal residential zone and the SFR1 zone. But still, this legislation requires a 2 acre minimum lot size.
Okay, well.
I see questions all over the place.
And Commissioner Toyoka, then Commissioner Bangs, then Commissioner Webb. This is the hot topic, I think. Commissioner Toyoka.
It is because, and especially, and I'm sure it applies to most places, but in Clatsop County, we have, municipal lands that are across the street next door to rural land. And then, so you have, on one lot, you've got a 7,500 square foot. So they've got ADUs on one side of the road. On the other side of the road, same environmental conditions exist. And now it's a 2 acre. And in this time of housing, we have to look at the proximity of these and say, okay, environmentally and, for geographically, an ADU would fit. And it's less than 2 acres. If it's a 1 acre lot, it should still be we should hopefully find a way to make that fit. And especially since you look at our municipal and rural land boundaries, again, so many times right across the street, you've got ADUs and, the next property over, you don't. So we've got to find something in that where we can, find allowances for our ADUs within less than 2 acres.
Isn't it wonderful? We now have a new county council. Welcome, Council Pope. Commissioner Toyoka, thank you for raising that issue. Anything else? No, Commissioner Bangs. You're muted, Commissioner.
Again, goodness. So my train of thought is right there with Commissioner Toyoka's in regards to, it's fascinating just in the area that I live in Napa, that, right next door is a community with 1 acre lot sizes or smaller. And, my lot size is 2 acres because I came after the 1990s. But I think just addressing this ADUs, it's, from what I'm gathering, ADUs are already allowable on the landscape, correct?
Accessory dwelling units are allowed now in the lands that are designated development. And those development areas are in the rural communities, and most all of them are on sanitary sewer. The second reason that I was going to mention for the 2 acre minimum lot size is, in typical fashion, it is very, very typical for the Department of Environmental Quality to want at least 1 acre per dwelling, because you need not just a septic system, but a backup drain field in case your septic system fails. So there's actually a kind of a physical constraint to how much infrastructure, how much a plot of land can absorb. And so part of that probably is driven by septic systems and what they do to the environment. So, and they're sized on the number of bedrooms, and that's and so septic systems have changed a lot over the years. The facilities themselves, there's a lot of new technology, but they requirements of DEQ have not changed. And that may actually have been part of the driving force for the 2 acre minimum lot size in the rural lands areas. So there is that physical restraint.
So just quick question, in rural lands outside of the municipalities, do we have any ADUs already permitted?
Not in the rural lands areas, the RA1, RA2, RA5, coastal residential. In none of those areas do we have accessory dwelling units. And do remember, please, Commissioner, that we have a really strict definition of what an accessory dwelling unit is, and that's different than a guest house. And the two of them may look very similar. The guest house does not have a kitchen, and it is not a full-time residence. It's for the temporary use of guests, relatives, family, whatever. And it is not to be used as a rental unit, as a short-term rental, for example. And it is not for permanent living facility. So, and it's smaller in size too. So the guest houses, though, they look a lot like ADUs to people. So they think there's an ADU there when there isn't sometimes.
Yeah, I was just curious because I was trying to dial in on I guess legislatures why the 2 acre, which you've answered, pretty thoroughly, and then just wishes and whys. I wish we could do more. Thank you.
That, to that point, Commissioner Banks, that's why we have secured the services of a lobbying firm. But we'll hold that thought for a moment. Commissioner Webb and Commissioner Toyoka.
Thank you. I think Julia has just answered my question. So thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Toyoka.
Thank you. And just to that point, the 2 acre as far as, capacity of the land and, septic and all that, again, I think we have to look at the geography we're working with. And if the land is suitable to carry, an ADU at 7,500 square feet across the street, I think there has to be some allowance that says, okay, this land is still suitable. It has the same, environmental capabilities as a 7,500 square foot across the street. So this lot here, even though it's now in rural land because of the way we've got our, the boundary set, should be considered for an ADU instead of the 2 acres. So however, we can look at that instead of, it's just like some of our GHO maps, which I'll discuss later, they're so arbitrary. I think we have to, take it on a case by case, and how can we do that? How can we facilitate, looking at individual lots versus, the broader spectrum?
There's reason and logic, and then there's state law. Here, that's what we're looking at. We have increasing population. We have increasing pressure from that population. We have increasing need for housing. The state law has not necessarily adapted to meet our increasing levels of population and housing pressure. This is where our relationships, our partnerships, but to use the county manager's term, come into play, because it's a political process to change those state rules. At least that's my thought on the issue. Is this a place where Julia can go forward now? We've all had our say. Okay, fine. Please proceed. Thank you for hearing what we had to say about this very particularly important point. Carry on.
Thank you. I do want to apologize for maybe not being clear. We do not have any accessory dwelling units on septic systems. We do not have accessory dwelling units in 7,500 square foot lots. We may have guest houses, but they are on the, if there's a septic system, the guest house has to be on the same septic system. So we do not have accessory dwelling units on 7,500 on anything in rural lands at this time on a septic system. So that's how we've gotten around that minimum lot size. And that again is legislated. So moving forward, let's see. Regarding wastewater and drinking water services, my property is, and so this is people responding, approved septic systems. 62% of the people who responded were on approved septic systems. 33%, a third, used an approved community water service. Another 17% obtained water from a well, a catchment system, or had local water rights. 9% of the people responding were not landowners. And then that made me feel very good is that there is 0 people responding who do not know what their water or septic source is. I cannot tell you how relieved I am to see 0. Just saying. Anyway, so then the question is, what level of public input should be required before the Community Development Department permits an ADU? And a minority, 14%, thought every application should have a public hearing before a hearings officer. Then about 30% thought a public notice should be sent to adjacent property owners, but no public hearings should be required. Vast majority thought that the permits should be over the counter, and that's the more streamlined system. And then 18% thought it depended on the size of the property, and I don't have further information about what the thought process was on that. So I apologize, I don't actually know what that is. But the vast majority looked at it as being a streamlined over-the-counter type application, just like we do for development permits for single-family dwellings. And that was the majority on the Planning Commission as well. Let's see, concerns included expensive application fees and making sure that ADUs are affordable to local residents. The county doesn't actually have anything to do with setting rents, so that's not actually something that we would have anything to do with. Expensive application fees, well, that one is on us. If we were to do this as an over-the-counter development permit style, just checking that, make sure that everything meets the criteria, that's an $85 permit. If it's in a geologic hazard area, then or a flood hazard area, there are other permits and reports that are required. But of course, that's the hazard zone that's driving that. Let's see. Rank your feelings about this statement. I believe ADUs can help address a housing shortage in Clatsop County. 42% strongly agreed, and 35% agreed. So people are looking to this as a means of helping with the housing crisis. And then we had, I would use an ADU for, and then folks saying what they would use them for, visiting guests and family. Actually, guest houses, you can use that for as well. Housing family members long-term, also in there, and providing a home for an elderly family member. And we do have some other ways of assisting people with that, but not with a permanent dwelling. So this would help people with basically some things that are of great concern. I'm going to stop for a minute because I see a commissioner.
Commissioner Bangs.
Yeah, well, so two things. The first one was, this has nothing to do with, it more has to do with the survey of why did we ask a question that the county really has no bearing on. The rents one was kind of fascinating to me, of like, why would that be on a survey? Because so I was just highlighting that as that was strange. Because we have no bearing on it. It's not something that we can control. Maybe, I guess, we were just looking for cares, concerns, and feelings regarding, but again, it's not something that we can control. And I just wanted to highlight something, that it's nice to hear that our Planning Commission is right on track with the majority of our constituents that filled out this survey. It seems like that our Planning Commission has a similar perspective as the majority of the folks taking the survey. And I didn't know if any other commissioners had noticed that point, but I had noticed it. And it was nice to hear that, you know, the Planning Commission being an arm of our commission, that they're sensing and feeling similar things. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner Bangs. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, Julia, please proceed.
Okay, let me, and I don't know who came up with the question about the cost. It may have just been kind of taking a pulse type thing. And and the information is good to have. I mean, even if there isn't anything we can do about it, it's good to know what the concerns are. So anyway, we had then the existing ADU regulations. And so you can see this is where they are allowed. We have Arch Cape Rural Community Residential, which has a sanitary district. They are allowed in the Napa Swenson Rural Community Residential District. However, we do not have a sanitary district out there, so we don't have any ADUs out there. We allow them in the rural community multifamily residential areas. Again, all of those are in rural communities that have the 7,500 square foot minimum lot size with the sanitary sewer district, and the rural community residential, which we have in Westport, Miles Crossing. So we do have the 7,500 square foot minimum lot size in those zones, just not the KSRCR one. So no ADUs in that zone at this time. And they are type 1 in those zones. So again, people come in with their plans and do their applications and get their permits from planning and from building codes. And it's over the counter. It does not require any kind of notification or anything like that. It's over the counter, and then whatever it takes for building codes. So these are the rural lands zones in Clatsop County. And this is under the Oregon Statewide Land Use Planning Program. And so these are lands that are outside of urban growth boundaries, and they are also excluded. In other words, we've taken exceptions to goals 3 and 4, the farm and forest resource zones. So these are the ones that we're talking about. So coastal residential zone, CBR, and that's basically Surf Pines. That's got its own unique zoning. RA1, RA2, RA5, RA10, and then the SFR1 zone. And so again, remember though, we have that 2 acre minimum lot size that is restricting us. And I thought this was interesting. There are 6,162 rural residential lots in Clatsop County, distributed as follows. We would have to do further analysis to make sure that, you know, we have the 2 acre minimum lot size for those and that they could meet other standards.
Julia, do you see
Yes.
the banks
Oh.
on?
Yes.
Well, I had 2 questions. One was in regards to carrying capacity of our current septic system, say in Westport, you know, rural area. Is carrying capacity of that system taken into account prior to a permit is being issued?
Prior to a permit being issued for development in for any development that's going to be, for example, anything that meets the requirements, and that's going to be a single family dwelling, of course, anything over 200 square feet, anything more than 10 feet in height, we require agency sign off as part of the application packet. And the agency sign off form for any single family dwelling is going to include a sign off from either the Environmental Health Department's on-site septic program or the sanitary sewer district.
Okay, and that will include the that does include the ADUs that are permitted in those areas, correct?
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay, awesome. And then my second question is I know that we're permitted in the Napa Swenson area in order to do the ADUs, but we don't have the septic system situation. Will this process then permit it being on a separate septic system? Okay, I didn't ask that correctly. I'm sorry, I'm thinking through my words in my head and I didn't ask it correctly. We don't have a sewer system out here. And obviously we can't have ADUs currently, but with what we're moving forward with would allow ADUs for us to have on a separate septic system. I hope that came out right.
I think I understand what your question is. So yes, in the Napa Swenson Rural Community Residential Zone, with you had a 2 acre minimum lot, if you had 2 acres or more, then it would permit you to have an accessory dwelling unit. And I believe that would be on a separate septic system, which is not in itself an inexpensive project. But yeah.
You answered what I was trying to ask 3 ways. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Toyoka has a question, and then Commissioner Webb.
The question is like currently, as I believe it says, it excludes Clatsop Plains area from ADU. regardless of 2 acre. Is that correct?
I was headed into that. Do we want to answer questions first, or do we want to go into that now?
Okay, didn't know you're heading in there, but I was just gonna, I'll wait till you cover that then.
Commissioner Webb.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. One of the things you mentioned earlier, Julia, is the pretty exciting innovations that are going on with on-site septic systems. Is it your understanding? Well, it's irrelevant. I'm sorry. I was about to ask you whether what the legislature had gone through in consideration with this legislation, but we're stuck with what they've given us. But did you all take a look? I do some consulting work up on the in Pacific County in Washington, and so I've been very much into exploration of some of the really pretty terrific innovations that are going on with on-site septic. Have you all taken a close look at those? Because an awful lot of them, for instance, one of the things that and mentioning the cost of things, if a property, a homeowner with a dwelling unit and an individual septic system wants to add an ADU, they could sometimes expand their own present septic system to include that ADU at significantly less cost. Have you all taken a look at some of those innovative activities?
Commissioner, no, we are not looking ourselves. The planning department is not looking at the innovations in septic technology. It would be interesting to know what all would be possible. And that actually was kind of headed where I was headed with the Clatsop Plains, because the Planning Commission, not unanimously, but by majority, did determine that the Clatsop Plains should be part of the ADU area. The RA2, especially, and RA1 that's on the Clatsop Plains would be considered for the ADUs, even though originally the Planning Commission had suggested it be left out, I think, and staff had that in there. We had taken it out. And part of that is we don't know exactly what the technology is going to be for septic systems, but the reason that the Clatsop Plains was of concern is because of the fragile soils in that area and the sandy soil, which allows tremendous permeability, and there's an aquifer. It's it's
yeah, no, there are a lot of complications up there.
Right.
The issue is, however, that there really is some pretty nifty stuff going on. And of course, always septic is dependent on soils, but there's some pretty innovative things going on that I would certainly hope that our ordinances would encourage and certainly at least allow. So I think it might be worth taking a look at what some of those things are. There are several companies in the Pacific Northwest that are kind of at the leading edge of this, and it might be worth asking one of them to come in and talk to at least staff and maybe the Planning Commission about some of the opportunities that exist. I just want us to be open to that kind of technology. Thank you.
Innovation. Thank you.
Innovation, that's what we're all about here in Clatsop County.
Thank you, Commissioner Toyoka.
Yes, and to that point, I mean, we're talking about different soils and permeabilities. If you look at City of Gerhardt, I know they did some groundwater studies and had 0 contaminant levels in their groundwaters. So that being some of the most permeable soil in the Clatsop Plain area, I think we could kind of look to that as a benchmark of, yes, it should be viable, and if individually, you as part of your planning or part of your permitting process, you've demonstrating, whether the site is allowable for a new septic system, and it falls within the new sand filter or whatever, it should be allowed in that area. I mean, because it's like I said, they've got data that showed there's no contamination in the groundwater sources in Gerhardt. So I think we need to look at that to help us expand where we can allow these ADUs. And I know talking to some other people within my district, they would like to submit not only their home plans, but a home plan with an ADU and a septic that complies to both at the same time, make it more expedient and better use of the land. So I think that's kind of the direction, hopefully, that we can look towards. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Efficient, effective, good for the economy, good for the environment, good for the housing situation. Hard to beat it. All right. Julia, carry on, please.
Okay. So we had some information about guest houses. We have the definition of guest house. For some reason, my screen doesn't want to work. Let me try that again. A little bit of an explanation regarding House Bill 3012, which was approved in 2017. And this is the one that allowed rural residential lands to have ADUs if an existing house was on the property that had been constructed prior to 1945. These are being referred to as historical homes. That doesn't mean that it's like 100 years old or more, although we're getting there. But in other words, the house has been there prior to Senate Bill 100. In other words, the house has been there. So that was House Bill 3012. And then we had, let's see, bear with me. Senate Bill 391 came along in 2021, and it expanded on the notion and did not require the historical home. So that, but it did also include the requirement that that the state basically waits for Senate Bill 762 which directs the state to map out wildfire risk and adopt maps to be completed before the ADU legislation can be implemented. So we are still waiting for that. And we are probably looking at March of 2023 before maps are released again. Staff does not know at this time when that might actually be completed. So all of this is contingent on getting the requirements of Senate Bill 762 completed. So let me see, I need to make that a little bit smaller so you can see it.
Well,
Oops.
and while you're doing that, I'll comment, the idea for having land use planning is the compromise between individual property rights and the common good. So there are issues of effluent, there are issues of wildfire safety. What we're looking for is a balance point that is least onerous to citizens and most protective of the environment. So thank you, Julia, for walking us through this as we consider these points of view and how to balance them properly.
Certainly. I have here, I believe you have already seen this. Oops, let me go back. I'm sorry. There we go. This was House Bill 3012, and you would have, I believe, seen this in January with some staff discussion and some staff responses. I wanted to bring you up to date with what the Planning Commission came up with on the October 11th of 2022, in other words, last month, where the question was about the Clatsop Plains. And so we actually had a motion and a second to remove verbiage excluding the Clatsop Plains from having ADUs, and it was approved 5-1. We did have a commissioner missing, and we had one dissenting. So that brings us to a majority of the commission voting to keep the Clatsop Plains in the language that has the ADUs as a use. And then we have historical. Well, I think that was, yeah, I think you've pretty much seen that. think you've seen pretty much all that. So anyway, let's see if there was anything else here that you have not seen. And I think that pretty much,
Commissioner Toyoka has his hand up.
certainly.
Thank you. Sorry for so many questions this time, but
No worries.
one question on when you talked about hazard zones and all that in our GHO maps, the new proposed map, I mean, has there been a review of that new map? Because it basically excludes building from pretty much all of Clatsop County, but just from my cursory research, it's not a on the ground, or it's just a LiDAR survey that's not really accurate. So what's the review process for that? And then, then the definition of hazard areas as we're looking at building.
Okay, the new GHO, geologic hazard overlay, that is being proposed is not vastly changing anything in terms of buildability or where properties can be built. It's going to remain very much the same. 85% of this county is in a hazard zone of some sort. I mean, we're living on the edge. But what the geohazard update is going to do is, where possible, use newer, better modeling by the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, so that we end up with reports that are specific to areas where people are actually building, but it's not going to exclude people from building. It just means that we're going to we've refined the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries has refined their mapping, and we're going to use newer, better mapping. That's what's being proposed anyway. And there's some changes in language, but that's actually a subject that's going to the Planning Commission next week, and then we'll be coming to your board as well.
Okay, thank you. I guess it's the verbiage, like you just said. It's because as you read it, it says, not in hazard areas, but then the overlays, depict hazard areas. So it would be like, okay, if you can't develop in a hazard area, but the overlay is as a hazard, is a geologic hazard, then how could you develop in that area?
The Planning Commission was not in favor, and most people, I think, that were responding in the public comments were not in favor of excluding hazard areas. It's just building to the standards in the hazard area.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And I personally, this is my personal opinion. I understand the constraints and the wanting to develop whenever possible appropriately. I do like the idea that folks who are renting have an idea, folks who are buying have an idea. That isn't a universally popular point of view. I'm just noticing that. So please proceed.
Okay. Let's see. I think that probably gets you most of the way with the Planning Commission's comments. And the materials in the packet on this. So what we would be doing, let's see, these are the draft amendments that you would have been looking at. So we have definitions that are updated, taking some information out and replacing it with other language. One of the things that we had to make sure to do was change the language so it's appropriate for the rural lands ADUs, which have different standards slightly because of the sanitary system and the minimum lot size and a few things like that, different than the development comprehensive plan designation in the rural communities, for example. So that's been taken into account. So we have our new definitions for guest house. We've got the definition for a single family dwelling for a historic home. So newer, updated language. The underlining, of course, is the new language. Strike through is what's coming out or what's proposed to come out. This is up to your board. And so staff is looking for input from your board on this as we go through here, to be able to take this forward into a planning commission for first evidentiary hearing. And I am happy to answer questions at this juncture. I'm sure that there are some.
Yeah, you bet. I see Commissioner Webb's hand is raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was confused by exactly what Exhibit B was. We are not in a position to amend HB 3020 and SB 391. So I don't understand what this effort is trying to accomplish here.
I think that what we're trying to accomplish probably really is feeling the weight of the opinion of the board that we are headed toward adding accessory dwelling units to our code and being ready when the approval comes and the Senate bill that that does the wildfire interface component is approved, and those maps are adopted, that we're ready to move forward with our amendments. Basically, we're lining our ducks up, I think.
So we are making, but HB, I mean, these have already been passed. This legislation has already been passed. So what, are
Yes.
we waiting for the regulations?
Well, we have to wait until the wildfire maps are approved and that legislation is adopted, or not adopted, but approved. And once that component is in place, then the rest of it, it's kind of like a snowball. The rest of it can then move forward. But we can't go anywhere with implementing the ADU component until we have the wildfire maps adopted. The wildfire, that's happening at the state level. So we're basically waiting for that. So we're just having everything ready to go when that is approved.
I guess I think that's, I guess I just think that that's very difficult to do. I think that when we took a look at the latest maps, and we're also stunned by what the implications were, that it was, I think it'd be a little tough to get real serious about our code amendments until we really understand what it means on the land. So I was just a little, as I was going through this, I just didn't understand how we could do this without a greater understanding of what the maps were going to look like. So I'm sorry, that's just maybe my own brain fog speaking, but okay, thank you.
Thank you for your point, Commissioner Webb. Julie, does that complete your presentation?
Well, that's the rural ADU portion of it. I have more on a slightly different topic, but I did want to see if your board has anything that you wanted to look at or pull out or pick apart from this proposed draft
For the ADUs.
for
Well,
the ADUs.
yeah, the intention of the ADUs is to provide more affordable housing and to increase our housing stock in a way that meets the needs of our people and still cares for the place. So Commissioner Bangs?
Really, I think that I would like this to be as streamlined and as simple of permit process as possible for folks. And I feel like our planning commission is on point regarding their thought process also. I just, with the perusal that I have done, it seems to be well. I appreciate you getting your ducks in a row. I appreciate you being ready, and I feel as soon as those fire maps come out, I look forward to accessory dwellings in rural areas to help improve our housing stock. So anyhow, thank you for all your hard work.
This really goes to planner David Cook and of course our director Gail Henriksen.
So thanks to staff for all of that. I would note though that the commission is interested in staff's insofar as your bandwidth allows, staying current with evolving technology in regards to septic, and also to the extent that Clatsop County can have a voice at the state level so that we have a more adaptive use of the landscape that also protects it. We want to stay cutting edge because we have unmet needs. Commissioner Bangs, you had further comment?
I did. I was just hopeful that when those fire maps come out, if we could circle back one more time before it goes to hearings with the Planning Commission. That's just a personal request. I don't know if my other commissioners agree. I would just appreciate to see it one more time.
I agree with that.
I want to understand what your board is suggesting. You want to see the fire maps maybe out in the spring. I saw something that suggested March. I don't know if that's going to be accurate or not. Are you wanting to have be able to have your board review the fire maps before the Planning Commission hearing? Evident, no.
No, it's for me, and it might be different from Commissioner Thompson. For me, it was just a brief, this is where we're at. This is going to the Planning Commission. The fire maps are here. Yay. This is the draft going to the Planning Commission. It doesn't have to be a repeat of this entirety. It's just a brief touch base, because I'll be honest, I need a daily planner and it's hard to keep track of all of the things running.
Yeah.
So
no,
a brief
I understand.
this is what we're going, this is where we're at, and this is where it's going. And we can all high five.
Okay. I guess what staff wants to make sure of is we were probably thinking of taking this for an evidentiary hearing to the Planning Commission possibly prior to those maps coming out. We have seen drafts of those maps, and Clatsop County's risk is low to moderate on the early drafts that staff saw. So we're not showing anything like what you would have in Eastern Oregon, for example. So I'm just checking, do you want to hold this back from the Planning Commission until those draft maps are out?
But let me ask a question. Let me answer your question with a question. I personally back up to Oswald West State Forest. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of neighbors up the coast who back up, who are on the border of the WUI. If what you're seeing is low to moderate and it won't turn our lives upside down, I'm comfortable going forward. If, on the other hand, the furor that arose is any indication of what the previous iteration of those maps did, I guess that's a judgment call. So maybe we can just stay in communication, because generally speaking, I agree with getting your ducks in a row, being ready to implement whenever possible. If you're confident, assuming that the new wildfire maps will not disrupt life for neighbors all up the coast or wherever there is an interface with the wildland urban interface, then yes, go forward. But if those wildfire maps, if you being tuned into that process, discern that there's something very disruptive about it, then I think we need to have another conversation. Otherwise, I would suggest it's okay to go forward. Commissioner Webb, you may have a different point of view.
No, actually, I agree with you completely. I mean, I think this is an issue of, I think I am extremely sensitive to the wildland urban interface, given the experience of the state of California during the wildfire seasons of the last, maybe 5 years. So I think it's an awfully important public safety issue. So I would like as early a notification as possible on the part of the board I always want to respect the process of going through the planning commission. But at the same time, I would just like a heads up for board members as to, being kept informed as we go forward. Thank you.
Okay, Julie, is that clear enough?
Ye-
We're halfway through this packet, colleagues, and we've got 35 minutes. Just saying. Okay, come on ahead.
I know, clear as mud. I'm okay with it going to the planning commission. I figure if it circles back with the fire maps, our original fire map wasn't, so yeah, I mean, I'm not wanting to hold up the process. I just wanted to, I guess, see the final result.
Yeah.
So, and more like just a communication regarding the process. So.
Okay, keep us updated.
Staff will always keep your board updated.
Thank you. We're agreed
Staff
on.
promises.
Okay, good. We're good with that.
Okay.
right.
All right. So the rest of this, maybe we'll go pretty quickly through so that everybody can go on with their lives. Let's see, legislative updates. Again, this was kind of all staff on board, except for yours truly. So I'm the one making the presentation. Everybody else got a year. And so there are legislative changes, bills that get passed most every year that sometimes are going to be affecting the county's land use ordinance. And so we need to keep those updated. We need to keep those online. Sometimes it's optional, like the ADU that you've been working through this morning. Other times it's mandatory and we have to do it. So anyway, we kind of got a little bit behind here and we are playing catch up. So this is from 2018 forward, and then going forward from here on, your board would be seeing these legislative updates annually. So you wouldn't have this rather large packet of them going forward, but this is playing catch up. So we had no bills that required changes to our comp plan or land use regulations for 2018. And there were some bills that staff determined that HB 4124 and Senate Bill 1533 have applicability to the county, but the county is not required to amend its code for either bill. And staff determined that these two bills would either clarify processes that are not specified in existing codes or would allow uses within the exclusive farm use zone. And so we then had a description that follows of these. And so this is what we have. PC comments on equine therapy should be a type 2 use, not a type 2A use. This was Senate Bill 1533, which allows equine therapy in the exclusive farm use zone. And the AF zone. And so the proposed language would allow that. And the PC thought it should be a type 2, not a 2A, so not requiring a hearing. And if your board is, let's see, the other one is governance option on LUBA remand. Basically, the Land and Water Development and Use Code is silent with regard to LUBA remand hearings. Counties such as Deschutes have included procedures in their zoning codes to address remand hearings, including language in the law doc would assist in future planning staff and applicants in understanding what the procedure is. So basically just clarification. If your board is okay with these two, then we would take this proposed language forward to the Planning Commission.
Colleagues, is there any objection to taking these forward? Julia, I see or hear no objection. Oh, Commissioner Webb.
I'm sorry, you were asking for an objection and I don't have an objection. I found this a really wonderful, I think, I don't believe that in the last 4 years of sitting on this commission, I have seen this kind of thing brought forward. And especially since we're so close to the AOC meeting, I love going to AOC with this kind of information. So I really, really appreciated this a lot, Julia. I felt it was, I was sad that some of it was so old. But so I hope you all can keep up this wonderful effort. And as I say, this is definitely going into my briefcase for the AOC meeting. So thank you so much. I really found this extremely useful.
Excellent. Thank you.
No concerns, only praise. So go forward. Yeah.
Okay, we thank Director Henriksen for this. This one is, let's see, this is from 2019. The state legislature passed 3 bills that required changes to local land use regulations. The first was 2225, which requires the county to use a mathematical centroid on the subject tract, when reviewing the template tests for forest dwellings. And I'll get to that in a minute because I know that doesn't not the clearest thing in the world. Second, House Bill 3024 modifies requirements for replacement dwellings in the EFU zoned parcels. And then let's see, and it would sunset and revert back to the current language on January 2nd, 2024. So obviously settling some specific need somewhere. And then the third one was House Bill 2790, which modifies definitions for outdoor mass gatherings requiring land use permits and amending how permits are processed and reviewed. There were some others that passed, but they did not require any kind of changes to the code. So let's look at these real quick. So let's see. Extension for farm and forest dwellings. This is the one where the proposed language would be the county may approve no more than 5 additional 1-year extensions of a permit if the applicant makes a written request for the additional extension prior to the expiration of an extension. So this is clarifying really. And the applicable residential development statute has not been amended following the approval of the permit. And C, the applicable rule or land use regulations has not been amended following issuance of the permit unless allowed by a county, which may require the applicant comply with the amended rule or land use regulation. D, an extension of a permit under subsection 2 of this section is not a land use decision as defined by ORS 197.015. So this is for creating extension period for permits to build buildings or dwellings, on ag and forest lands outside urban growth boundaries.
Could I hold you up a minute?
Yes.
Commissioner Bangs, you've got the most rural district, I think, outside of mine, most in ag. Do you see this as working any hardship on your constituents? When I saw that, I wondered about that. It seems to me it's flexible and adaptable, but you might be more tuned into things.
It seems flexible and adaptable. It's hard to read on the screen, and I'm trying to flip back and forth between my agenda. And so, Commissioner Thompson, what particular phrase is causing you to?
It's just your geography. It's on page 58. So of our packet, which makes it legible for me because then I can hold it up in front of my eyes. But I'm
trying to zoom in and it's not working.
That's why hard copy sometimes works. I want to be able to have appropriate sidebars and consequences. I want them flexible and adaptable. It seemed to me that this satisfied that, but I thought from your knowledge of your district, you might have some other point of view. And if you don't, that's fine. I'm not looking for trouble. I wanted to do a touch base. Commissioner Webb, your hand is still up. Did you have an additional comment or is that leftover?
No, I have a question.
Okay, please proceed.
I wondered whether this component, whether this section is primarily intended to address temporary dwellings for farm workers?
No. This is for a conditional use dwelling in the agriculture, forestry, exclusive farm use, or F80 zones. This is typically, these are template tests, or that's what we call them,
Oh,
template
yeah.
tests. And the
Okay.
approval for such a conditional use permit is for 4 years, and then somebody can get an extension for another year, or they can show that they're vested if they have substantial construction and they can document that. This actually allows a little more flexibility and gives them the ability to get additional extension.
Okay, I'm sorry. I completely misinterpreted it. Do we have anything in our code that relates to temporary dwelling units for farm workers?
Not temporary dwellings for farm workers. We have farm worker housing.
Okay, and that, is it possible, what are we approving in that case? Are we approving the structure? Or
Under farm worker housing,
Yeah.
the
And-
structure and the use.
and the use. And so if people are basically not there permanently, is that allowed?
Actually, farm worker housing frequently is not for permanent dwellings. People
Right,
come
right.
and go with seasonal use. But sometimes people may be there year round. It depends on what type of farm use it is.
Okay, okay, fine. That's what I was, I'm sorry. I guess I just completely misread this. Okay, once again, we're back to the template thing, which I am not sure if I'm going to live long enough to understand the whole template dwelling process. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be well into the next century before I'm going to get it. But so thank you as always, Julia.
Stick around, there's still hope. Commissioner Bangs?
Yeah, so I'm reading this just in response to you, Commissioner Thompson. I'm reading this as more flexibility, and maybe I'm just not seeing what you're seeing. But how it comes across is it's just allowable that for them to reapply and continue to reapply, and it is only addressing, from my understanding, forest lands, which is F80, and I would think that the only thing that this would have fallen under is like the experience with the fire department down in your district might have had a template test necessary, but maybe I'm reading it all wrong. I don't know.
Okay, Julie, I think we're good. We may be a little confused. We're still paying attention, but we have hope that we will understand it and it will be properly applied. So please carry on.
Okay, well, just a quick follow-up. What this does is it allows people who have a conditional use permit for this type of dwelling a little more time without having to make a whole new application, because a lot of times what people are doing is trying to get infrastructure in place. These are not always easy things to develop, so it gives them a little more time, and they can make these extension requests, and the fee is much less. So it basically allows more flexibility. And if you were not confused before, then I bring you a change to the template test process, which is required of us, and this is mandatory, and this is going to change how we do the calculations for the center of a tract. We have to use a mathematical centroid, and I apologize, I have not seen an algorithm. I don't understand exactly how this works. We will probably be working with GIS, but it requires that we find the absolute mathematical center in order to put the template. Think of it as like a dressmaking pattern that we drop over the plot, the parcel itself, and it has to be oriented a certain way, and it's this very specific size, and so we have to drop it over a very specific point to center it. And one of the concerns that came out of the Planning Commission was how the centroid is defined, and so we will work on that and get that into the code. And then there was also a concern about whether or not we need a survey for every parcel to ground truth each parcel, because we have an awful lot of parcels out there that if they're over 10 acres, they have not necessarily been surveyed. And so anyway, there's some concerns about that. And so what staff had planned to do is reach out to other counties, because the way that this is being implemented by statute is it was over 3 years. And so we're on the final leg of it. We have another year before we implement it. And so 2/3 of the state's counties have already implemented it. So we plan to check in with those other counties and see what they did, see how they did it, and then steal from the best. So that's where we're headed with that. But we don't have the ability to say, no, we're not going to do this. This is mandatory. So we will do what we can to find the best practices already in use and use those. So that you can see our language updates here, taking language in, taking language out. Were there any questions on that one, or would we rather just not even look at that anymore?
I think copy paste makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Wait, Commissioner Webb, you have a hand up?
Well, Julia, I think that I just figured out why I had my brain injury.
Oh dear.
Because I think it had to do with my reviewing this part of the of your submission. Because it was the farther I went into this, anyway, thank you. I probably might ask the planning department to pay part of my hospital bill because you all really did blow my mind with this one.
Oh, Commissioner Webb, grandma humor. I'm telling you, welcome back. We're so glad you're back with us.
Thank you very, very much. But I got to tell you, this, I'm the person who says I'd rather write a zoning ordinance than do almost anything else. But when I went through this packet, I had the worst headache I've had in the last month. So Julia, God bless all of you all for going through what you must have had to go through to produce this that made my head hurt so much. So, but as I say, I am gonna ask you to pay about 10% of my hospital bill. How's that sound?
Commissioner, I don't know whether to say thank you or you're welcome. The planner who worked on that was our planner, Jason Pollock, on this particular one, and it is more complex. So
it really is. I mean, but God bless you for doing this work because I realize it's really important. It's just that, boy, when I do my usual rant about how everything that government produces in writing should be understandable by every John citizen. Wow. I don't know how you make this understandable. I really don't, but you've sure tried valiantly. So thank you. I'm sorry. I was looking for a little bit of humor in my raging headache. So anyway, thank you, Commissioner Thompson.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, if we're compassionate and flexible, that's what we can hope for. If we tell the truth and do our best to be kind to each other, I think that's the underlying principle for the work that you have done here, you and your colleagues have done here, Julia. And I think that your commissioners accept it in that spirit. You did hear some concerns before this. I hope we can continue to have conversations about this. I wanted to leave a little time at the end in case commissioners had overreaching. And Julia, I assumed you're done. Are you done?
Basically, yes. There wasn't anything in 2022. I don't think there was anything left in 2021, honestly. Yeah. So that's it. some proposals for outdoor mass gathering, just a couple of other items. If you have anything else, please, any concerns or anything, please let me know. If you have questions, if I don't have answers, I will find them for you.
Well, good. Going forward, we like, I think, at the commission level, as I listen to my colleagues, we like very much what you've done. We like the work that the Planning Commission is doing. We're hoping to go forward to address our emerging community issues, looking proactively again at what our county needs to say to various state agencies in order to make the best use of our land and best take care of our people here. So we'll look for your continuing input and guidance in that. But is there anything else? I don't know if the county manager has anything to say about what I'm asking for, because I'm kind of pushing forward into a future, as Commissioner Toyoka said, and Commissioner Webb and Commissioner Banks. We're interested in being not only up to date, which the planning staff has done for us, but we're also interested in contemplating what we need to do, how we need to partner with various agencies going forward.
Chair, council members of the board, if I might real quick, I think that a lot of the work that Commissioner Toyoka mentioned regarding just the affordable housing initiatives and the task force, there are going to be conversations, and there are ongoing conversations about how there is some of that coordinated movement between all jurisdictions regarding housing and zone modifications and comprehensive plan modifications. So I think that both things are happening simultaneously. One is getting the foundations in place and the updates, and then the other is also to have the information we need to look into the future and figure out what are some of the mechanisms that need to be in place to actually move the needle as it needs to, as we move forward. So I think those are both happening, and will continue to emphasize both sides. Thank you.
County manager, well done. I notice people keep trying to make you a county commissioner. That's not going to happen. We like you where you are, sir.
I like where I'm at too. Thank you, Commissioner.
So we're all happy with our chairs. And speaking of chairs, we've noted that our finance director is moving on to other territory. So we thank Jennifer Carlson. We have with us Anthony Pope. Now, I didn't say to you, guess what? I'm going to put you in the focus point and welcome you to Clatsop County and just ask you to introduce yourself and say a couple of words about yourself and help us get to know you a little bit. Help us welcome you.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I was born and raised in Cottage Grove, and I went to school out in Hawaii before going to law school at the University of Arizona. Most recently, I was county council down in Curry County, so the very south of the coast. I kind of flipped that, all the way up north now. But yeah, I'm excited to be here and get involved. It's been a pretty busy first 2 weeks trying to get to know everybody and what's going on here, but I'm excited to be here and to work with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. We are delighted to have you. As you can tell by this meeting, we are curious, we are flexible, and there's a kind of a level of demand that comes in because we're interested not just in being effective now, but in planning for the future so that we're able to really leave this to our children and our grandchildren in a way that that honors all of us. And you're such an important part of that. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Colleagues, does anybody else want to say anything else? Okay, well, I pushed Julia, she talked fast. I think we've raised our questions. There are no other items then on our agenda. We're able to adjourn. So there's an extra 12 minutes for your day. Thank you, everyone, and take care.